so much. That was so emotional. I'm like, I'm like trying to get it together. Hey. Thank you, everyone. My name is Madison Sierra, and I will be going through my High Road Fellowship experience this summer with PPG. But first, I want to give a brief intro into myself. I am an undergrad student at Buffalo State College. I am born and raised in Brooklyn, New York, and came to Buffalo 3 years ago to fulfill my Bachelor of Arts degree in political science in hopes of one day becoming a first-generation law student. And the title I chose, Grounded in Community Driven by Purpose, was because I felt it truly embodied my experience with PPG this summer. Grounded in community was something that I really felt throughout PPG. I felt like I was able to be an active citizen within the community of Buffalo. And while I've been here for 3 years, I can say this summer was the first time I felt like a Buffalonian. I really got to meet so many inspiring people, especially through the podcast with Deja. We would meet with community leaders, and I get to have one-on-one conversations with them even after the camera was rolling. Someone who I connected with in particular was Tindahi from Eastside Stewards. I was so inspired by his mission and his story, as I felt there was some type of connection where his work was more than a job, it was fueled by passion. After the podcast, we coordinated with Tindahi in order to volunteer at one of his future events, as there was just so much more I wanted to do and give back to his community and mission. And these are photos here of the summer interns volunteering at Eastside Stewards event in the community garden. And this brings me back to something that Sam told us in the beginning of this program, was that you identify your assets and build up. This summer, I realized that the sense of community in Buffalo is an asset. And because of that sense of community, organizations are able to build up together and create better lives for Buffalonians. Another takeaway that I got from this summer, and another way that I saw PPG being such a heavy part of their community, was that they were being a bridge and standing in the gap. This summer, I learned from our High Road fellow, Kimberlyn, that standing in the gap means to with their partners, relaying their resources in order to help other grassroots organizations be just as successful as they are. And this was PPG's pure purpose. I began to see how they bridged inside strategists, those within systems, and outside strategists, those within the community, in order to create true effect. They were the bridge and policymakers. And because of this, I was able to be in so many transformative spaces and experience things I have never imagined. Which brings me to moments I never imagined. I will give a brief background in my high school self. I was not a straight A student, and I struggled a lot to keep up in class. Because of this, I feel like in rooms even like this, I struggle to realize whether I will actually be able to thrive in these environments. However, through this summer, I've experienced things that my high school self would have only dreamed of. I was able to attend Sean Ryan's election party and watch him win the Democratic primary. And I was featured in the Buffalo News at the Tesla press conference. And these moments were things that I truly was able to take something away and build on myself, realizing that as long as I stayed true to who I would thrive in any environment. And lastly, one of the most important parts of my summer was that PPG allowed me to find my purpose, the things that were driven by passion. During this podcast and working with Deja, I was able to connect with people in so many different ways, not just through community work or research, but I was able to have one-on-one conversations about the things that mattered to me and to the Buffalo community. And if there's anything that I could say that I took away and that I would want other high roaders to learn as well, is that it is important to find what lights you up, to find your passion and to follow it. Thank you, and I will be handing it off to Hudson.
Hi everybody, my name is Hudson Athis. This summer I worked at Workers United, but more specifically I worked at the Hyatt Regency picket line downtown, where there's actively a labor dispute. Not a boycott or a strike yet, but I want to talk about labor peace agreements today. Labor peace agreements, to go over a quick framework, are city-established laws that require employers and developers to apply certain conditions in exchange for a no strike and no lockout clause, in which the union agrees not to strike and the employer agrees not to lock out workers, and in exchange there are certain concessions granted to make it easier to organize that workplace. Currently, labor is under attack from the federal government, and the NLRB has been dismantled to a point of being ineffective. I believe that labor peace agreements provide a city framework for how we can respond to this, and specifically here in Buffalo, as I saw on the picket line, I believe labor peace agreements are the key to achieving unionization in difficult terrains like hospitality and travel. To go over that quickly, I want to talk about a little bit of my experience on the picket line, where one of the most common things I heard from hotel guests was, "I'm not from Buffalo, I'm only here for a few days." They want to go by you quick, I understand it, and it's true, they're only here for a few days. I understand it in some sense. Why should you care? You have busy things to do, you're at the hotel for a few days, you're not spending that much time there, you are not a stakeholder in this community. This makes these industries very difficult to unionize, especially as the primary customers and platform to buy a hotel room is online before you even arrive at the community. And many people, without doing their research, it is difficult to find these labor disputes, even if you're searching for them. I believe, to go over the history of labor peace agreements before I go into why I think they should be implemented here in Buffalo. Labor peace agreements were first established in San Francisco in 1980 as a response to a different hostile administration in the Reagan administration, who also used the NLRB to attack unions. And in response to this current labor board and this current hostile administration, I believe that a revitalization is not only necessary, but necessary here in Buffalo. So to currently go over where they do exist, this is a map of the major cities that have labor peace agreements. As you can see, there's a bit of a concentration on the West Coast, but they are present across the country. And I'll quickly go over all these cities. Now this is a big table, I'm not expecting you to take this all in, but I'm gonna go over a few of these key points and what makes specific cities unique. So I would first like to go over a card check. What that means is essentially if there is a union within a workplace that believes that they have majority, they can have workers sign cards, and if they get over 50%, a union is automatically recognized in that workplace. This is required in only one city in the country, it's San Francisco, which means that in San Francisco, developers have to sign labor peace agreements with card checks. There's also a wide range, like in New York City. New York City is the only city to extend beyond city-owned or city-invested properties. In New York City, hotels with over 100 rooms also require labor peace agreements. And then guaranteed workplace access, which is a feature in a few cities, including San Francisco, means that the union is guaranteed to be allowed into these workplaces. And then I also wanted to quickly cover arbitration and neutrality, which are in most of these frameworks. Arbitration meaning that if there's a dispute between the union and the employer, it goes to arbitration instead of a long, lengthy legal procedure like is currently happening at the Hyatt. And neutrality, which means that the employer essentially cannot union bust, which is also currently happening at the Hyatt. So then I want to cover why this could work in Buffalo and why I believe it should be implemented. Buffalo gives millions of dollars to developers like Douglas Jamal, who intentionally refuse to talk with unions and intentionally fire workers for their attempts to unionize. I believe that by attaching city funds to a labor peace agreement requirement, this can be overcome, especially with a likely new mayor in Sean Ryan, who recently won the Democratic nomination, who ran on a pro-labor platform, and I believe with Sean Ryan's help and with unions' help specifically, a labor peace agreement framework could help in the Hyatt, but also across the city, as currently there are no union hotels in Buffalo. For a town that prides itself on being a union town, there are no union hotels. This comes down to there is one union hotel, technically, but it's pretty out there too. Yeah. But an anecdote I can give you is that even for the ILR school here, there are no event rooms to book in a union hotel. This was told to me by one of my managers in Cricky. But yeah, that is my point. I believe that with Sean Ryan's help, we can implement a labor peace agreement framework in Buffalo, and it would greatly help unionization efforts like the one actively going on at the Hyatt. So, thank you. And I'd like to welcome up Yvette.
Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Yvette Wu. I'm a rising senior at the School of Industrial and Labor Relations, and I'm originally from Beijing, China. This summer, I've been working with Steve, Donna, and Jerome at New York State Jail's Justice Network. And today, as the topic of my showcase, I want to share my experience as an incarcerated individual at Erie County Correctional Facility, which was my first time ever going to see someone in a jail, and also an experience that has fundamentally reshaped my perspective on criminal justice. So on the right side of the screen, this is a very typical picture of a non-contact visiting room in jail. And this one looks almost exactly like the one we were in. There is like this thick layer of glass that separated us from the person we came to visit. And we have to talk through this very fuzzy quality phone, which we could barely hear each other. The person we visited was shackled the entire time during our visit, which made it very difficult for him to hold two phones at the same time because he needed to talk to both of us. And this is where I saw distrust deeply embedded in this institution. I also saw vulnerability of incarcerated individuals, not only in terms of the poor living conditions in jail or loss of freedom, but more of the feeling that your rights can be taken away by anyone at any time on an arbitrary basis, and the fact that there is no proper way for you to advocate for or even just defend yourself. He talked about how he was put into the box, so-called the box, which just means solitary confinement, for 24 hours per day. In the little cell, he couldn't talk to anyone. He was denied access to commissary. He was offered degraded food, the even worse food compared to what the population is having. And most importantly, all the grievances he filed were ignored altogether. And even in that situation, he remained resilient. At the end of the visit, when the correctional officer came in and said, "Hey guys, your visit time's over," he turned around, looked at the CO in his. I know this sounds like a story I just made up, but Steve was there. Incarcerated individuals were able to remain resilient even under an unfair environment. So now when I look back at all my projects I've done in the past 8 weeks, I see each of them exists for a reason, in which they directly respond to a systemic failure that's going on in our county jails. No matter it's when analyzing data collected from past jail visits, or conducting literature review of medication-assisted treatment across the 50 states, or is filing FOIA requests to contain information about jail conditions from the jail management. I saw lack of human dignity in every aspect of life in jail, And most importantly, I witnessed firsthand how difficult it is to do advocacy work for criminal justice. And all those I just shared were just a tip of the iceberg of what's going on in our county jails. And this often brings me back to the question we ask ourselves a lot of times during this fellowship. What does it mean to take the high road? For me, the low road first was just what I saw exactly in the visiting room that day. It's a mindset defined by punishment for thinking, dehumanization, ineffectiveness, and secrecy. However, what I've been doing and what my colleagues have been doing for decades is to take another path, a path toward restorative justice, community-based support, transparency of information, and diverse programs that can actually rebuild people's lives. So before I wrap up my presentation today, I want to share a quote I really like from Victor Hugo. It says, "The guilty one is not the person who has committed the sin, but the person who has created the shadow." This quote has been very inspiring for me because it asked me to not just look at the people who are incarcerated, what have they done, but to look at the system and structures that have placed them in the shadow involuntarily. And I guess this is just the biggest takeaway for me this summer. It's just we're all responsible for this shadow we created, and therefore it's also the responsibility of each of us to keep learning and doing actions to replace this shadow with light. Thank you. And I'll introduce our next fellow, Renee.
That's fine. Talk real loud then.
You guys can go ahead. Hello, everyone. My name is Renee Cabrera. I'm a rising junior at the ILR school. I'm not going to give you much of an introduction. We're just going to roll with it, and you're going to see what's going to happen. I promise there'll be a conclusion at the end that'll tie it in all together. All right. Welcome back, everyone, to America's favorite game show that absolutely no one asked for. Who gets to say? I'm your host, America, and today we're joined by 3 bold contestants trying to win the grand prize, the right to remain in the United States. They'll face off in 3 intense rounds as they navigate everyone's favorite bureaucratic nightmare, the U.S. immigration system. In the end, only one may be allowed to call this place home. Let's go ahead and meet our contestants. First up, we've got Mark, the CEO of United Care Hospitals, here on a work visa. He only agreed to appear on the show if we made one thing very clear. Mark was not at any Coldplay concert in the last 30 days. We good?
Yes, we're good. Thank you so much for having me. This quarter, we've been able to maximize patient care and help our employees by charging for parking and offloading medical equipment.
Wow. A true hero of capitalism. Thank you, Mark. Next up, we have Evie, a social media influencer from the Netherlands who totally accidentally overstayed her travel visa by 6 years.
Hey, that's not cool. Don't go telling people that.
Girl, that's literally the point of the show.
Whatever.
All right. Last but certainly not least, we have Crystal, a 17-year-old certified nursing assistant who came to the U.S. when she was just 7 years old.
Hey everyone, it's good to be here.
All right, time for round 1. How useful are you? Because apparently just being a person isn't enough.
Well, my company has 10,000 employees.
Well, my Instagram has over 100K followers, and I did a collab with Help brand last week. Well, and I work overnight shifts at the nursing home. I clean, feed, and help patients with, their daily tasks.
Whoa, that's a lot, but hey, Instagram numbers don't lie. nation without representation. That's right, the US loves your money but doesn't want you to vote. Well, let's see who's paying to be ignored. Mark? That's right, when you're rich enough, taxes are more of a suggestion anyway. Abby?
Maybe my dad can go for that stuff?
Got it. Crystal?
Well, I'd say roughly $2,100 in taxes per year. That's roughly like 15% of my overall income.
Dang, can't even get a vote or a refund. Love that for you. All right, folks, it's time for the final round, the wild card. This round is based on vibes, paperwork errors, whether someone spelled your name wrong in 2012, and of course, what country you're from. Crystal, since you actually pay taxes and do real work, you get to spin the wheel.
Sorry.
All right, let's go.
Spin it.
Woo! Oh, well.
Oh.
Oh.
Uh, yikes. Classic. Oops. Hold on. Uh-huh. Yeah. Oh. Bad news. Turns out none of you guys get to stay, including me, and I was born here.
Wait, what?
Wait, who's gonna make money off of sick people now?
Like, what? You're going to work later, or?
And that's all the time we have for today, folks. Tune in next week to play Who Gets to Stay Student Visa Edition. Spoiler alert, it's not the guy from Mexico. So even though that sketch was trying to be funny, it came from a real place. This summer, while working with 1199 SEIU here in Buffalo, I was also helping to start Ice Watch Topeka back at home in Topeka. At times, it felt like I was doing two completely different things: immigration work in Kansas and labor organizing here in New York. But I realized it was all connected. Whether it's immigrant rights, workers' rights, or healthcare, it's all about dignity and it's all about justice. Through this fellowship, from the justice journey to long days with union members to reflections with other fellows, I started to understand what it meant to commit to that fight fully. And through it all, I wore the same t-shirt almost every day. Don't worry, I had multiple t-shirts. It says, "Keeping the dream alive." At first, it was just a t-shirt, but by the end of this summer, it became a reminder of why I do this work and why I'm not stopping. Thank you. You will now hear from Sonica.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Sonica Saraf. I'm a rising sophomore at ILR, and I'm from St. Louis, Missouri. And this summer, I was interning with the UB Center for Urban Studies. One thing about me is I absolutely hate rejection. Okay, I'm sure that most of you guys also hate rejection, but me, I can't handle it at all. Like college application season, club recruitment season, and even applying for this very internship had me bedridden with anxiety. Like, I'm still not over my college rejections that happened 2 years ago. So when I was told that I had to cold call people for 7 hours every single day, I was not a happy camper, because what cold calling is literally getting rejected 24/7 by random people you don't even know. But why did I have to cold call in the first place? This summer, I was tasked with the project of building a communication system for the East Side Transformation Project, a project aimed at co-building the Upper Broadway Fillmore area to create a community that is based in health, happiness, and joy for the Black community there. So, this communication system was aimed to send alerts, news, and opportunities through a texting system and an email newsletter, just to connect and actually communicate with them so we could get their input on the project that we're building in their neighborhood. To build this, I first wrote up a briefing on what the system should actually look like based on a literature review. Then I started the cold calling phase, where the reason I had to cold call in the first place was because I was given a database of registered voters in the area, and I had to call them all to see if the numbers actually worked. Then I looked up people on white pages to get more personal information about them, like their email. And lastly, I actually built the newsletter and texting service, and I tested it out in the past 2 weeks. Overall, I called 356 people, of which 58% of them had a valid phone number. 12% actually answered, 9% said yes to becoming a communications member, and 3% said no. If they didn't answer, I made sure to leave a voicemail, and don't worry, I used the script when calling people because my heart can't handle small talk with strangers. I'm not gonna lie, on the first few days of this week of cold calling, every single time I would dial in someone's number, I prayed to God that they wouldn't answer. But alas, a lot of people did, and then I had to hit them with the intro like, hey, this is the UP Center for Urban Studies, is this blank blank? But what I soon found after every single phone call is that I could kind of anticipate people's responses and that they fell within one of 4 categories. The first one being a reluctant acceptance. These people were concerned why I knew their names and their personal information, but they were willing to hear me out. The second one is the I'm at work, leave me alone, which I thought was completely valid because if I got a call that sounded like a scam during work, I totally would have just hit them with this. Third one, which was kind of disappointing to hear, was me getting cursed out. Of course, this didn't happen very often, but it happened more than I expected. And it was very, very discouraging to hear, but I had to move on. And then the last one is just a quick and easy hang up, which is what I personally do when I get scam calls. So I was like, oh. Obviously, in the first phase of this week, when I got a rejection, I was really discouraged, and often I had to step out of the office and take a 30-minute walk because I was just so anxious to make that next call. But as I started to make more and more of these calls, I realized that, people were more nicer than not. If they were willing to pick up the phone, they were more than willing to listen to me. And when they rejected me, they would often do it in a nicer way. Obviously, there were some people who cursed me out, but I believe that was from a place of just them being busy and them just not having the time to listen to me. Because of this cold calling, I was able to build a newsletter that looks like this, and I was able to build a database of viewers and subscribers that covers all of the Upper Broadway Fillmore area, exactly what we wanted the system to do. Overall, I'm really proud of my work cold calling because not only was I able to build a system like this, but I was also able to kind of get over my fear of rejection. I learned that rejection isn't as personal as I made it. A decision has an extraneous number of factors that goes into it. In this case, it was because people just didn't have the time to listen to me. They were at work and they just didn't have time for that 2-minute phone call. And I hope to cross-apply the same mindset to other things that I might apply to. Rejection shouldn't deter me from a future opportunity or anything that I hope to do in the future. Thank you so much for your time, and I'll hand it off to Sophia Chen.
All right, good morning, everyone. So my name is Sophia Chen, and I'm a rising senior at the School of Industrial and Labor Relations. I'm from Howell, New Jersey, and this summer I worked at Extra Extra Pizza. So today I will be talking about my 10% of this summer. So for those who may not know, going the extra 10% is about intentionally stepping just outside your comfort zone. On the scale, 0 means you're staying stagnant with no growth, while 90 means you pushed way too far and feel unsafe. So that extra 10% is where growth really happens. And at first, I didn't really feel like I grew much as a person this summer, but as I reflect on the past 8 weeks, I realized that I actually exceeded my expectations limitations in terms of what I can achieve. And as Cookie likes to say, I have many moments where I want that extra 10%. So the first 10%, right here, right now, public speaking. And in case you couldn't tell, literally makes me like shake in my boots. So while my friends and family may know me as an extrovert, put me behind a podium like right now, or ask me to raise my hand in class, and suddenly I'm forgetting how to speak. So this summer, I challenged myself by pushing myself to talk once during our Friday journal reflections, panel reflections, or during shoutouts. And I know that doesn't sound like a lot, but trust me, it was really terrifying. But after each time I spoke, I realized, wait, like this isn't so bad. Like, why was I tweaking out about this? So my second 10% was driving. And the drive from New Jersey to Buffalo was the longest I've ever done in my 5 years of driving. 7 hours solo, and it was my first unofficial road trip. I drove across the Canadian border not once, not twice, but 3 times. And it was my first time in Canada ever. But my biggest 10% for driving didn't even have to do with actually driving on the road. It was parallel parking. And the picture on the right is actually my most recent parallel parking job, something that I'm very proud of. And also shout out to people who guided me along this journey. And now my next 10% was starting a food account this summer. And as much as I say that social anxiety fears me, something about attempting to take aesthetic pictures of food in public makes me feel so embarrassed every single time. But, you know, I had to do it for the bit. I wanted a way to document my time in Buffalo, and food just makes sense. I'm a huge foodie, and every restaurant I visited, or recipe I tried, or every dish the cohort made came with its own memories. And the more I posted, the more it encouraged me to explore the city of Buffalo, try new cuisines such as Puerto Rican food, which surprisingly, I actually have never had before this summer, and even rediscovered my enjoyment in writing, making it fun as I recalled the food I ate in my reviews, recollecting each and every flavor profile. But most importantly, working with Extra Extra Pizza was my biggest 10% this summer. This experience completely reshaped how I view the restaurant industry. My parents have owned a takeout restaurant since I was in elementary school, so my understanding of restaurant management was shaped really early on. And, most of the other restaurant owner kids I knew had very similar stories. We were all that kid that you would see in the corner doing homework after school. We were the kids that could barely reach the counter when taking your order at the cash register. So because of that, I thought I knew what running a restaurant looked like. So when I came to Extra Extra Pizza, a worker-owned cooperative, I was really excited, but also really nervous to see something different. And what I saw truly gave me a totally new lens on the industry. Extra Extra Pizza wasn't just about food or profit, it was about the people. And as I helped out at Essex Fair and Co-op Fest, I began to realize that small businesses could play a deeply intentional role in their communities, not just as service providers, but as connectors, as collaborators, and as change makers. And I began to understand that food, wine, and the space itself were being used as vehicles to do good. That idea really stuck out to me. Any organization can be a force for community building when it leads with care, whether it be educating, organizing, or serving cheese and pepperoni pizzas. And so at the start of the summer, I found myself wishing my parents' restaurant had been more involved within the community. But as I reflected, I realized that my parents were involved, just in quieter and less obvious ways. They hired people others might have overlooked. They supported new restaurant owners, and they gave back locally, even if it wasn't posted on social media or printed on flyers. And this summer, in choosing things outside of my comfort zone and growing 10% at a time, I learned that community looks different everywhere, and I learned how to see it more fully. So thank you. And next, I'd like to introduce Nathan Masha.
Great. Hi, everybody. I'm Nathan Masha. This summer, I had the pleasure of working with Ready Bike Share. I'm from the Buffalo region. So I'm from Hamburg, New York, which is about 30 minutes south of the city of Buffalo. So very familiar territory for me, so it was awesome to be able to work in my own community. I had the pleasure of working with my supervisor, Simon, who was so wonderful that I actually made my presentation about him. So let's get into the 5 rules of working with Simon here. Perfect. So rule number 1 is you should probably have social media if you are the marketing and communications intern. So yeah, I came in and told Simon that I didn't really use social media, and I think his head nearly exploded. But you know what? We still may do. I did a lot of work with doing graphics. I was updating the social media. We were doing interviews with the community, like in this picture, where we were working on our e-bike rebate program, our pilot program this summer, giving discounts on e-bikes to lower income individuals. So despite not having social media, we still made it through. Rule number 2, always bring your bike poncho. I definitely remember one of the first times I had to deal with this was we were leaving a community event. We were on our way to a news interview, and it's pouring out, and Simon pulls out his bike poncho, and he looks over at me, and he's like, "Oh, I only have one. Looks like you're on your own here." So that was, yeah, that was funny, but this is, here, a little video that I have to mute because I was probably saying bad things in it. But this is just like, oh, it's not, oh, shoot, uh-oh. Uh-oh.
We got it. You got it.
Is it up? No, see, just playing on here, not
You
playing on
just
there.
gotta escape.
Oh, thanks.
Sorry, Nathan.
No, that's okay. I don't know what happened.
We just gotta
Oh, thanks.
escape.
Beautiful, there we go. There we go, that's a little example of what I was dealing with one day. Biking home. Had to mute it to, yeah, probably not saying good things there. But good, and then, oh boy, where are we here? What's that? Oh, but where are we? Oh gosh, all right, hold on. Start from here, here we go, perfect. All right, there we go, all right. Rule number 3, always tell Simon you biked into work, even if you didn't. I promise I didn't lie that much. But coming in, first day I drove into work, I'm like, you know, I'm just driving in every day. I don't care, like, whatever, bike share, whatever. I just want to drive my car in. And I go out to the parking lot, and I pay $9 for my parking. And I'm like, oh, my, I'm never doing that again. So ever since then, I drove halfway to work. I would drive to Riverworks, and then I would bike the rest of the way in. And, you know, this really showed me how much you could save by just simply biking. It was a 2.5-mile bike ride to work from where I drove in. And just between parking and gas money and maintaining your car, I saved about $375. And as a broke college student, that is awesome. But, you know, it's just amazing looking at it from the other perspective where being in not as privileged shoes, maybe being a lower income individual, how much money that is. It's expensive to Uber. It's expensive to get a bus pass. It's expensive to maintain a car. And so this really opened my eyes to how valuable bike share can be, not only for me, but for the entire community as well. Number 4, make sure your social battery is charged. Simon loves to talk, but that's not the biggest deal why you should have your social battery charged. It's because we are out in the community so much, and that's what I love so much about this job is you are out in the community. You're not sitting at a desk every day. You're out tabling events. You're out engaging with the community. You're teaching them about bike share, signing up people for memberships, doing trivia with kids. Or once in a while, we have people come up to us and start berating us about biking is dangerous, and you have to convince them and show them that it's really not, and it's a valuable part of the community. So what I really loved is being a newer bike share user, sharing that perspective with people who were unfamiliar with bike share. That was the best part for me. Rule number 5, you better have completed the 100-mile challenge. Ready Bike does tons of wellness challenges throughout the year, one of which is our Ready 10 challenge, celebrating our 10th year as a bike share network. The other one is the 100-mile challenge, which we do every year. I was able to reach that. I just surpassed 201 miles. So not bad, yeah. And that's my routes, all the different trips I took this summer throughout the city. But yeah, you know, I'm not expecting you guys to do 201 miles, but you should definitely try out bike share. And if you're not going to be in an area with bike share, at least support it. I'm sure one of these things resonates with you, whether it's recreation, health, sustainable transportation, or cost savings. whether it's extending your lunch break and getting somewhere you couldn't get during work, whether it's trying out an e-bike, a pedal assist e-bike that you didn't have an opportunity to, whether it's just going for a recreational bike ride in the city and not having to lug your bikes in the car all the way. It really is amazing. And looking at it from, yet again, the other perspective, where if you're a lower income individual, you oftentimes don't have the opportunity to access these things. So if you're not thinking about using bike share, this is why you should absolutely support it. And people were able to get out and support bike share this summer, which was awesome. So we did our little Ready Bike Share High Road competition here. So I'm not going to call you up for the sake of time, but if you want to stand up when I call your name, that would be great. So coming in third place with 14 miles, that was Luke O'Brien. Beautiful. Coming in second place with 21.2 miles, Hudson Athis, perfect. And the winner of $40 in Amazon gift cards, Madison Sear on 28 miles this summer. So I will get you your gift cards right after, don't worry. But thank you guys so much for a great summer, and thank you to everybody who got a few miles on a Ready Bike. Great, and next up is our High Road Builder Award.
Hey everyone, my name's Kathy Creighton and I am the director of the Buffalo-Co Lab. Shout out to everyone who's gone so far. This is an amazing presentation. You guys are awesome. So we have an annual tradition where each year we recognize an individual who's made an outstanding contribution to the Cornell High Road Fellowship Program. And this year's High Road Builder Award is given to Sam McGavern. Come on up, Sam. It's hard to describe Sam. You can't just say Sam is blank because his life encompasses so many things. Who is this mysterious Sam McGavern? He's married to Monica Engel, and he's been married since he was 22 years old. He's the father of two sweet and successful daughters, Anna and Caroline. He's a dedicated son, a dedicated brother, a beloved nephew to his aunts and uncles and his cousins. He's a lover of nature. He's a birder and a builder, a trail builder. Sam is a legal services lawyer, a living wage litigator, a law professor, a visiting professor at Cornell. He's the founder and creator of the Partnership for the Public Good. He's a researcher, a policymaker, a mentor. And in my opinion, the culmination of all the things that Sam is that he is a poet, a creator, and a convener of the arts. On the High Road, Sam selflessly gives to the High Road since its inception. He starts our pre-course with our students in the first day, where they all come together, and he does a workshop where students talk about where they're from, and they tell the story of where they're from, and then reflect on who gets to tell the story of where you're from. Why does it matter who tells the story of where you're from? When High Roaders arrive, Sam brings them on a bus tour around the city of Buffalo, where he explains the history, the places we're seeing, the inequities around Buffalo that we're going to be working on, and then and he sort of sets the stage for the High Road Fellows in Buffalo. And then finally, Sam leads us in a field day out in the country, where we swim and eat and do crafts and play sports, and we enjoy fellowship with each other, where we have a time to really bond. And Sam does all of these things each and every year, volunteering his time to the High Road Fellowship Program and his ever-loving, cheerful, optimistic self. To know Sam McGavern is to love him, and I'm so happy that we can give Sam the High Road Builders Award this year, 2025. All right, come on up, Sam. We're going to have this framed in a nice way for you. Thank you.
Thank you. That's so nice.
mess this up. We're now going to take a break, to a bio break and to just gather ourselves. 10 minutes. So it is currently 5:02. We'll be back here at 11 o'clock. The bathrooms are located downstairs, and there's a really great Adam Ziglett's presentation down there.
I left my glasses.
this is me now. I still like fashion, and I still have to get a job eventually. But I have some new hobbies. I like to crochet and I like to embroider a little bit, thanks to Stitch Buffalo. But the biggest change has to be that I now understand why I like community service. I now know why I want to make a difference. It's because whenever I'm doing something that makes a change in my community, it gives me a purpose. I have a reason for what I'm doing. I see the people who I'm helping. So now I understand that having a job and making a difference, giving back to my community, these things can go hand in hand. So you might be wondering, what caused this large change in my mindset? And so it has to be all of the, oh, there's missing a slide. I'm so sorry. All of the people I met this summer. And from just talking to people at Stitch Buffalo, hearing their stories, why they're here, or just talking to my fellow cohort, I get to see how passionate they are about what they're doing, their projects, their companies, and it makes me want to care that much more about what I'm doing. It makes me want to put in that much more effort. And so I think the day that it really clicked for me was definitely during the second or third week of my internship. And so if you don't know what Stitch Buffalo is, I would first recommend going checking it out because it is so amazing. And so just to put it into a nutshell, Stitch Buffalo is a nonprofit where they use textile arts to empower immigrant and refugee women. And so my main project this summer was to create a lookbook for all the women to compile their best work and pieces. And so one of my first steps, and honestly the hardest step, had to be finding the right website or software for this lookbook. And the reason why it was so hard was because every time I'd find a website, I'd find the smallest flaw or error in it and I'd throw it away. Again and again, I would find an error and throw it to the side, going on to the next one. And it was because I knew that this digital lookbook I was making had to be perfect. I needed this website, I needed the software to be perfect. But when I took a step back, I realized why it had to be perfect. It was because every day when I walked into Stitch Buffalo, I saw the people who I was working for. I got to speak to the immigrant and refugee women. I heard their stories. I got to be their friend. And I realized that if I did a perfect job on what I was doing, if I did the best that I could do, I could help these women. I could improve the efficiency and communication at Stitch Buffalo. I could help these women make a living and have a job, make money to survive better. And so I think that's when I realized that whatever I do, my job has to have a purpose. At Stitch Buffalo, every ounce of effort I was putting in had a purpose, it had a reason. It was helping someone. And I think that everything I've learned, ties directly into a quote from Dr. Taylor. He said, "With greater talent comes greater responsibility." And as a High Road Fellow, for all of our High Road Fellows, we were chosen because we are passionate and we're talented. So this summer, I saw that I'm a part of something greater. I'm woven into something greater. And because of that, I am responsible for making my community the best that it can be. So I might not know exactly what I want to do yet, but I know that whatever I choose, I have to have a purpose. I have to have a reason for doing what I'm doing. And I need to see that I'm helping and making a change in at least one person's life. So thank you so much. And next up is Abhishek.
Hey everybody, my name is Abhishek Gurubhaskar, and I have the privilege of working with Justice for Migrant Families this summer. And I'm from Edison, New Jersey. Justice for Migrant Families is a nonprofit organization. We serve the refugee and migrant families of the region. And for those of you who don't know, about 40 minutes away from here, 700 people are trapped in the Batavia Federal Detention Center. We run a hotline to the center, and I've had the privilege this summer to take up a few shifts. So I want to reflect on the stories I've heard and the people affected, not only inside, but also outside of Batavia. I've read a lot of prison literature, memoirs, poetry over the years, and there's something to be said about, okay, on a surface level, I can understand. American incarceration, any form of it, is horrible. But it's something totally different. When you pick up the phone and you hear someone struggle to describe in their second, third, even fourth language, their personal hell. A little bit of background on me before I talk about some anecdotes from the summer. The High Road fellows know I love antitrust and antitrust policy. I talk about ad nauseum. Is what I want to do in the future, is what I believe in. And a big part of my philosophy is like, okay, change might not come today, but 5, 10 years in the future, if we can make it happen, that'll be enough for me. And to ask for everything to happen right now and today is selfish of me to say. But I think that's changed a little over the summer. And to talk about it, there's 2 anecdotes I want to say. One day I walk into work, I open up my email, first thing in the inbox, it's this 18-year-old begging for help, right? And I'm reading this email, it's long, I'll spare you the details. But he's lost his father. He has to support his family, he has to pick up extra jobs, he's struggling in school. And I'm reading this email, I'm like, damn, I'm 18 too, damn. He came here at the same time I did, damn. I'm reading through all these M dashes, and I'm like, damn, he uses ChatGPT too. He could be at Cornell as well. But I am, right? And am I supposed to tell him, okay, there's a better future? He talks about, I want this dream my father came to this country for. I want this better life for us in the future. And how can I tell him that it may not be today? You may be detained, deported tomorrow, the day after, but maybe 5, 10 years in the future, it could happen. But it's not all bad. One day I pick up the phone and this man, he just got released, right? And we're talking for a little bit. He's thanking us for the help. And I hear his kid in the background, right? Laughing, playing. And while we're ending the call, I say, hey, enjoy the family, man. And he responds, I am. You can't even imagine I am. And he starts crying on the phone. And I'm sitting there. And I'm thinking, it's not a better life. You know, his family is still in debt because he was kidnapped for 4 months. But it's better now. And if there's anything I've learned this summer, is that we don't just owe it to the people of this country to fight today, to fight for a better today. We deserve it. And sorry. And I'd like to thank everyone here for being a part of that and for being here and fighting for not just 5, 10 years down the future, for vague platitudes, for forgotten promises, but for making change in our communities today. Thank you so much. And now, give up your hands for Mackenzie Whedon.
Sorry, that was really inspirational. Give me 1 minute. Hi, my name is Mackenzie Wadeen. I'm a rising senior at Cornell's ILR School, and I'm from Englewood, New Jersey. This summer, my official placement was with the Community Foundation for Greater Buffalo, but I had the great pleasure of working at the office at Partnership for Public Good with Anna Felikov. And I'm here to lead you through my summer in Buffalo, no pun intended. So firstly, L is for lead and legacy. This summer, I learned a lot about lead poisoning, but in many ways, the story goes way back. When I first applied to the High Road Fellowship, I didn't get any of my placements, which was okay. I had an open mind, and I was just really excited to be in a new city and doing good work. When I found out I would be working on lead-related issues, I didn't expect it to feel really similar. So, pictured on the left are my grandparents. For some background, my grandfather was a nephrologist, and his research expertise was lead poisoning. So while I wasn't in the lab or dealing with the science behind lead, I learned something even more. I learned that lead poisoning isn't just a health issue. It's a social justice issue, it's a housing issue, and here it's a Buffalo issue. Oh, and this is me and Anna. One of the initiatives that I helped run was the Erie County and Buffalo Lead Office Hearing Pilot Program. This is where individuals with lead-related housing code violations would come to the health department to help solve their issues and reach compliance. The map here shows the properties of where these violations are. There are a lot more properties, but these are just the properties that have been cited so far and that have been summoned to the health department. There are about 400 other cases. So these shows that the violations are in pockets of Buffalo where there is underserved communities, just showing how this issue goes way back. I won't bore you with all the data that we have found, but a significant finding that we did find was that only 41% of those summoned actually showed up. And there were fines, emails, letters sent out to all these individuals. We also found that owner-occupants were individuals that actually own a house were much more likely to show up than landlords, which is a whole nother issue I won't be getting into. But what I realized is that there isn't just a lack of resources. There's the grant and loan programs in Buffalo has several issues that need to be solved. There is long waits, and most of the income criteria and even eligibility criteria, most Buffalonians can't even meet. Next, E is for exploring the city. And while I didn't capture every place I visited, I have photos of the people who made the places special. And exploring the city also meant eating lots of food, which the cohort is really known for, it seems. A is for advocacy. And this is what bridges the gap between people and policy. This summer, I also had the chance to help support lead education by attending community events. What I really learned is the importance of accessibility in education. And I'll give you a small anecdote to show this. At one event we visited, we were doing a presentation on lead education to a group of immigrant families. And at this event, we were fortunate enough to have translators there who could actually translate what we were talking. And this is unfortunately not super accessible to everyone. Advocacy means more than just sharing information. It also means making it accessible. So we always try and keep lead information, and we have, I think, 15 different languages so that everyone can have access to it. Lastly, D is for the Duncan versus Tim Hortons debate, which is really controversial here in Buffalo. So while they say that America runs on Duncan, Buffalo seems to be the exception. And while I can't speak to the coffee since I am not a coffee drinker, my controversial take is that Munchkins and Tidbits taste nearly identical. However, as a Jersey girl, and I think my fellow New Jerseyans can also relate, what Buffalo really is missing is a Wawa's. Thank you for letting me lead you, and I will be back in Buffalo because Ricky and Kathy have me obsessed with this place. And next, I would like to welcome Jacob.
So, if we look at my mug here, you might notice there's something familiar about the location. And that's because, as part of my research with Preservation Buffalo Niagara, I got to go right across the hall to the research library. That was a real treat. There's a wonderful woman who runs it named Cynthia Van Ness. I wanted to shout her out today. It was just one of the exciting things I got to do as part of my research this summer. So my name is Jacob Saley. I'm from New York City, but I have roots in Buffalo, so I've been living with my grandpa, Joe, who's here with us today. It's been good to be back. It's been good to work for Buffalo again, give back a little. I will be a senior in the fall at the ILR school. And before I go into my research, I would like to share an anecdote. For the High Road Fellows here today, it's more of a cautionary tale. So do with it what you will. So, throughout my tenure at Preservation Buffalo Niagara, given I was reading and reading and reading and archiving and researching, I got a promotion pretty early on. I don't know if you guys have had a job before, but a promotion in 2 weeks, that's a pretty good turnaround, right? So this lived at my desk. It was my name card, if you will. I was Scholar Jacob for the majority of my time there. No, this is not to say I didn't have human moments. This is not to say I didn't make mistakes. Maybe the scholar title went to my head. But one day, who knows what happened? Maybe it was an act of God, but I slept in, you guys. And I was a little late to our weekly staff meeting. Now, I didn't get off scot-free for this, you guys. Consequences came front and center. Intern Jacob was what I was left with. When I tell you I was distraught, I mean, that's like an understatement. No, I'm just kidding. I worked hard to win my title back, though. Learned to take it seriously. And, while we all have our human moments, I appreciated, building up these skills, having this repetition. And I think that's what's so beautiful about a program like the High Road Fellowship. Kind of lets you build these skills as you transition into real life. And so, for the fellows at least, as you enter the real world, I hope you take my warning to heart so you can avoid catastrophe. Oh. Now, to transition so smoothly, I want to talk about my actual project. So I spent my time researching Buffalo's remaining Green Book sites. Now, we are lucky that there was a great movie made about the Green Book not too long ago. Just show of hands. Have you seen this movie? Do you guys know what I'm talking about? Excellent. Excellent. Now, I recommend you watch it if you haven't. It is a great story of how the Green Book provided safety for Black travelers during the tail end of Jim Crow. It's about, these are two real people. It was based on a real story. The man on the left is a guy named Tony Lip, and he was escorting the man on the right, Dr. Tony Shirley. He was a pianist, touring throughout the South. He thought it was important to break racial barriers in the 1960s. Now, their journey down south would not have been possible without a traveler's green book. It was a comprehensive list of businesses nationwide that catered to Black business. This would be anything from hotels, restaurants, gas stations, even something as mundane, something as mindless as getting gas for your car was something you would have had to absolutely think about if you were traveling while Black. And this was not just a Southern issue. The Green Book started in New York City. It was made one man's idea, Victor Hugo Green. He was a mailman in Harlem. He first published the 1936 edition, just detailing New York City businesses that were safe for Black people. And this was published as late as the 1960s. The need for this was that strong. Buffalo appears as late as early as 1939, excuse me. So I guess my point is this was not like a Southern issue. It's not the racist South or anything like that. It's a silly idea. This was a nationwide problem. It's a nationwide illness of racism that the Green Book tried to address. Now, I don't want to talk about what I did. I don't want to throw numbers at you and information. But I wanted to just tell you about my main takeaway here. My main takeaway from the summer was, that I learned how Buffalo's past, how Buffalo's history can be a credit to Buffalo's future. Through my archival work, through looking through old newspaper clippings, through hanging out in the Buffalo History Museum, I learned how, if we build historical records for some of the Green Book sites I was researching, that we can, build avenues, and we can take positive, constructive steps to revitalizing these vacant sites in Buffalo. So I want to just give you guys a little walkthrough of some of the businesses I was looking at. These are mostly on the east side. Most of the time, my Green Book sites were vacant. Some were actively being renovated, which is wonderful. But, it gives I was left with a strong idea at the end of my time at PBN that, that by applying this enthusiastic interest in history, building this record, building these archives, that we could take these positive steps to put businesses back in, revitalize these communities. Here we go. They're all vacant commercial buildings. They're old, beautiful. They often reflect the immigrant history of Buffalo's neighborhoods. Part of my research was looking at how, different foreign language newspapers would flip, talking about these same addresses. In 1880, you would have a German language newspaper to reflect that identity in this community. Next, it would be Italian or Polish. You could see how these communities actively evolved over time. Okay, that's my story. Before I head out here while I'm still in the pulpit, I want to thank Emily and Laura so much for sharing your enthusiasm with me, for sharing your interest with me in the office. Laura is an expert on graveyards if you have questions for her. And Emily is an urban explorer. She has all the best places to show you. While I have you guys, I want to thank you so much. I told myself I wouldn't cry up here. I didn't want to, now I feel like a big bubbling baby. But anyway, I appreciate you guys so much and the work you do. All right, thank you. Akeem is next. Can we get a round of applause for Akeem?
All right. That's a good spot. All right, so my name is Akib. I was with the Partnership for the Public Good this summer. I go to the University at Buffalo, slated to graduate 2026, if all goes well. Kind of from Buffalo, kind of from Brooklyn. You'll see later, I kind of grew up in both. Wasn't born in either. But yeah, so I'll just jump right into it. I've always been a curious person. As a kid growing up in Brooklyn, you're kind of set at the center of everything, but I was just too young to explore anything, so I found myself stuck at home a lot. And what did I do? I scrolled the internet. So that led me to a bunch of YouTube channels, one of them being Vice News. Are any of you familiar with that? Yeah, so it was really a revelation when I, first came across it. It wasn't unlike any other news channel that I've watched. I mean, we used to have News 12 back in New York, and like they just talk about the weather or like school closings, but Vice was different. It was raw, it was unfiltered. They would go into all sorts of crazy war zones. The reporters, they would drink, they would smoke, they would curse, you know, they would get along with wherever they went, just become like a part of the fabric of the people that they were exploring. And I just really love that authenticity aspect of that reporting. So yeah, that brings me to just the importance of media in general. So media gives organizations and people, issues, everything that it covers, visibility. So it'll put issues on the map that a lot of people haven't heard of. I mean, here I was, this 9-year-old kid in Brooklyn, learning about this moonshine epidemic in Nigeria. Like it was just amazing to learn about all of these things and to know that media was bringing these faraway places closer. It also gives people personal connection to whoever is presenting this information. So I've got some comments off of Zoran Mamdani's, one of his many famous Instagram posts. And you can see people saying like, this person lives all the way in the UK. This election shouldn't have any impact on their day-to-day lives, but because they're able to follow him on Instagram and see the issues that he supports, they understand the impact that the things that he stands on has on even, her living all the way across an ocean. And then there's accessibility, last but not least. I think that's probably the most important, because a lot of the work that, even at PPG, that I've seen done, Sam McGavern, amazing work. The reporting, it's crucial to get like the points across for the press conferences and all that, but for day-to-day people, like my parents, I have a good test to see if like any kind of media is accessible or not. And it's basically, all right, here we go. It's basically, do my immigrant parents know about this thing happening? That's my test to see if something is accessible or not, because they are, working class. They come home after a long day at work. They might not have the time to go to like any kind of meeting or learn about these things. So if they don't know about it, then it needs to be more out there. And I think that's where I see the importance in media. So with my time at PPG, I was approached to possibly create a video about ranked choice voting, which is something I have not heard of before my internship. And I chose to tie it in with chicken wings. Now, why chicken wings? It'll make more sense once you watch the video I made, but just for some background, it's really just something that is geographically relevant. It's a little controversial. I know a lot of folks have their favorites. Maybe your like granddad took you to one, and it's just like, that's just the soft spot you have. And if anybody says anything about it, you might do something. So all that put together, I just made this video. So I hope you guys enjoy it. It's a little fast paced, so try to keep up.
If you're from Buffalo, then you know what the best wing spot is.
I'm with Franco's all the way.
I would have to say Gabriel's Gate.
Just gonna say something generic, like probably Duff's.
But with so many options, how do you pick just one? I'm here on Hurdle Avenue asking today, what's the best wing spot in Buffalo?
Now I'm freezing up.
What if you didn't have to settle? What if you could just rank them?
AKA C. White, I'm an international comedian, and I'm from Buffalo, New York. We'll say Gabriel's Gate on Allen Street. Lenova's and Heaven's Countertop on Hurdle.
That's called ranked choice voting. Let me break it down for you.
Let's say Akeem is asked to pick his favorite wing spots in Buffalo. So he ranks them on a ballot, picking Wingnuts as his first and Duff's as his third choice. Now let's look at the results. If a spot gets over 50% of the votes, they automatically win. If not, then the place with the least number of votes is eliminated. And voters who chose that spot as their first choice will have their votes count toward their second. And this happens until a candidate reaches 50% or more, in which case they win.
So whether you're Team Duffs or Team Barbell, ranked choice voting makes sure that your vote counts.
Thank you. I just want to thank Cricky and Kathy for inviting me on the Fridays. I learned a lot about my city. Like when Sarah first told me, like, yeah, you'll be hanging out with the High Road crowd and going around Buffalo. I'm like, oh, I know Buffalo, but there's a lot of things I learned this summer that I would have never known, and I'm very grateful. So thank you. And I'd like to introduce Ray next.
You're leaving me with a lot to figure out here. All right, so. Okay, great. 'Cause I'm gonna Good afternoon, everyone. Hey, wait, is it the afternoon yet? Or morning? My name is Ray Clark, and this summer I was working with New York State Senator April Baskin's office, and I am a student at Buffalo State University, and I am graduating in December with a degree in international relations. I am from Buffalo, or actually from Chautauqua County, and I live in North Buffalo currently. And I just want to take a moment to have you envision driving down a city street, and you come across some plots of land that are just grass. You're thinking about a time in Buffalo, too, where there was a tragic event that happened over on the east side, 514, and you think about how there was a food desert. There weren't any opportunities for people to eat, and different organizations had to bring in food just so they could make ends meet. And I want you to think about, if you were to build a grocery store on that land, what would that look like? Well, you'd have to start by analyzing every angle. Think about, how are you going to get that land? How are you going to make sure that land is safe? How are you going to make sure that you find someone that is taking the high road, building on that land, making sure that what is going in, that business that's going into that property is getting a fair rent? What are you going to do? So you think about understanding every angle, because there is power that comes with working for a common goal. Did I miss? There's a slide missing. That's okay. They're kind of actually all over the place. Okay, well, it's totally cool. So tomorrow is better together. If you think about all of the different presentations that have been going on today, the common theme is that we all have to work together in order to achieve a common goal. Collaboration is critical for success, and the senator tasked me with the Revive Retail project this summer. I was the Revive Retail coordinator, and I'll actually be doing that through December with the group. Basically, what we do is we have compiled a list of some subcommittees, and these subcommittees consist of land development, basically recapping, how do we make sure this land is safe? There's a lot of toxic land in Buffalo, and we want to make sure that if we're building, growing, and playing on that land, that it's a safe place for them to be. Next up, we have a program development subcommittee. So we're looking to go to Albany and request a lot of money to come over to the east side of Buffalo. And in doing so, we have to develop a program to get that money. And in the program, what that looks like is, how are we going to set up this application process? Who will be applying? What will this look like for distribution of funds? And so another group of people would be creating this program.
next up we have community outreach. So I want a grocery store, but do they? Right? Doing that market research, seeing what they want there and making that come to life for them. And lastly, we have a finance subcommittee. So this one here is going to be the nitty-gritty of, well, we have the grants, but what else can help supplement them? And we make sure that we're utilizing the expertise of trusted partners in our community to help get this job achieved, help get this dream come to fruition. And for me, the bigger picture is when I grew up in my small town, I always thought of, well, how can I get this dock better? Like, I grew up on the lake. How can I make a better dock? How can I plant a wildflower field for my community? When I was a little girl, I was dreaming of these things. And so this summer, when I was looking at the opportunity in front of me, coordinating different groups of society, I was able to put this to life, in my head. I'm like, wow, this is a transferable skill that I can take anywhere. So that's the bigger picture. Thank you, everyone. And next up, we have Luke.
All right. How's it going, Oh, okay. I'll just stand behind the podium. Now, I know what you all are thinking. Me and Hudson wore the same shirt. No, this is not like the time that we wore the same flannel to the bar and looked incredibly white. We coordinated this time. But how's it going, everyone? My name is Luke O'Brien. I was a fellow this summer at Workers United Upstate New York and Vermont. I am a rising junior in the School of Industrial Labor Relations, and I'm from Williamsport, Pennsylvania. I'm going to talk a little bit about how labor can defeat international corporations. This is an incredibly pressing issue in our time. I have Amazon listed up there. That's one that everybody knows. It's a job that is essential to society, and yet you can't make a decent living by working that job. You're trapped in a terrible cycle. And maybe a lesser known one, but one very important to Buffalo that me and Hudson worked on this summer is the Hyatt Regency, an egregious union buster and very bad employer. So on that question, right, it's a simple answer. You have to hit them where it hurts. Now, in the 1930s, that meant the 1936 Flint auto body strike. Look at those guys. They're having a great time, aren't they? They should have been, because they were taking down one of the largest companies in the entire world by shutting down one single plant that made all of the auto bodies for the General Motors system. By doing this, they were able to idle plants across the country and make a company that nobody thought would ever recognize a union have one of the strongest unions in this country. I think of auto work now as a decent job that you can have with a high school diploma. Amazon does not have quite that one centralized location, but it maybe has these kind of strategic targets, right? Listed in the purple. I won't get into the nitty-gritty of it, but these are the places where all of the goods in the Amazon network are imported into it. So, that's thinking about it from the logistical standpoint, but there's so much more going on, right, that you have to take into account to understand how do you put pressure on an international company, on billionaires, on people like this. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what that meant at the Hyatt Hotel here in Buffalo, Hyatt Regency. So that means looking at who's the owner, who are the stakeholders, who are the key relationships, what are the profit centers. Yeah, so I'll get right into this. Unfortunately, this animation didn't work, so one of the things is spoiled. But you might think that it's the Hyatt, right? Go after Hyatt Corporation. They own it, right? No, not quite. It is leased out to a not-so-good dude named Douglas Jamal, who is a billionaire real estate developer from Washington, D.C., who gets a lot of money from governmental sources to develop here in Buffalo. He takes that money and goes and buys a new car or a new building that he does nothing with. So this is actually the person that we need to put pressure on. The Hyatt name is another thing that you can put pressure on, right? They do lease that name out, and they're a heavily unionized company that cares a lot about their brand image. So we actually sent a delegation to Chicago this summer to confront Hyatt International, protest outside of their headquarters, and there's been some rumors that they are going to take action against the Hyatt for their union busting. J.B. Pritzker, some of you might know this face. He's a 2028 Democratic presidential hopeful and a pretty decent friend of labor as far as the wealthiest governor in the country can come. He is an heir to the Hyatt fortune. And so it's not a great look for his 2028 presidential campaign that his namesake company is doing union busting here in Buffalo. So we've been putting some pressure on them. Southwest Airlines, a very densely unionized company, we were able to get them to cancel their contract at the Hyatt Regency because of the union busting happening. We're trying to do the same thing with the New York State School Boards Association. And this is Mr. Mark Polenkarts. He is the Erie County executive. We recently saw him walking out of the Hyatt in a meeting with Douglas Jamal. We found that rather suspicious. We're able to confront him at a cookout. He said that he did not want to get involved in labor disputes while he ate labor's hot dogs and burgers. So we're trying to get him to say that he's not going to give any more of these hundreds of millions of dollars to union-busting billionaires. Believe it or not, right, if you're interested in this and you go to Cornell, sorry, to the few who don't, I really recommend that you take Introduction to Labor Research with Kate Bronfenbrenner this next semester. It's the last time this class is going to be offered. It really gave me a whole new perspective on the way that companies work in the modern era and how you can combat them. And you can come and help out at Cornell Young Democratic Socialists of America. We are signing a memorandum of understanding with the United Farm Workers, and we're going to be doing some pro bono strategic corporate research with them. And I'm really excited to get into that next year. And without further ado, I'll introduce Simeon.
Hello, everyone. My name is Simeon Swavey, and this summer I worked at Jericho Road Community Health Center, researching health equity in the city of Buffalo. I thought it would be cool to share with you some of my findings with you all. In this case, starting from the present day and then going back into the past. Sort of like the film Memento, if you've ever seen that. Now, like that film, you may feel a bit overwhelmed at the beginning, but just stick with me, and I promise it'll all make sense in the end. So let's get into it. We start at the present day, and we're shaping up to be one of the most consequential years for the state of healthcare. For weeks, I had been doing research on the history of health equity causes in Buffalo for a large timeline that will be installed in Jericho Road's main building on Grant Street. And while doing this, I was also helping design a number of posts on social media. You can see some of them up there. And one of these posts related to the recent signing of the Big Beautiful Bill into law. It is a piece of legislation that will cut millions of Americans off their Medicaid and ramp up ICE enforcement on our health center's most vulnerable population, that is our refugees, asylum seekers, and immigrants simply looking for affordable quality care. But how did we get to a point where a country is cutting millions in Medicaid and food stamps to fund efforts to deport and break apart families all over the country? The answer, I believed, lay in our history. So going back a bit, it was in the 2000s where Buffalo's place as a border town of Canada made it a major city for resettlement for migrants and refugees. Shout out Alex for her work at Jewish Family Services. And before this, Buffalo had suffered a steep economic decline thanks to an exodus of many of its residents when jobs became scarce. Thanks to these resettlement programs, immigrants were able to find better opportunities and breathe new life into Buffalo's community and economy. However, this demographic often struggles with attaining good mental and preventative care due to language barriers, high expenses, and the high expenses of private insurance, which is why Medicaid is such an important service. What I've come to find is that Medicaid is a central service for the poor and working class. And yet, throughout its history, it is often undervalued, underfunded, and villainized. This is especially consequential for a city which has a history of public health problems. Not only is the city's immigrant population falling through the cracks, but the Black population, which has lived in the city since its founding, has faced many health disparities after years of redlining and disinvestment. There are issues of nutritional deficiency as a result of living in food deserts, and of lead poisoning as a result of the older infrastructure here. These issues are systemic in nature, and the way our system is structured to preference those with private health insurance means that people who cannot afford this insurance will inevitably fall through the cracks. Now, I believe it or not, there was a time when the US could have gone in a very different direction. In the early 40s, there was a drive by lawmakers to implement some form of national health insurance as a safety net program as a part of President Roosevelt's New Deal. However, there was a campaign by the American Medical Association to discredit nationalized health insurance, fearing the effects it would have on the private insurance industry and on individual physician autonomy. There began to be this expectation that Americans had to work for their health insurance. When programs like Medicaid became prominent in the mid-60s, it became conflated with poor people and people of color, perceived as not wanting to work for their health care. Now, this is just a fraction of the things I've learned, but clearly you can see the historical narrative here. As I came to better understand the story of Buffalo, I was surprised to find that these consistent parallels between different points of our history, whether that be the refusal to improve healthcare because of various social prejudices, or the intersections between infrastructure and various health outcomes, there's this sense of clarity in knowing that many of these issues stem from similar causes. It made me realize that the fight for health equity does not just involve these isolated sets of issues. Rather, it's a consistent narrative about how man-made social systems determine health outcomes and how we can come up with solutions to create health outcomes for the better. I'm very proud of my work for Jericho Road this summer, and I hope to see how it contributes to this movement at large. Thank you for listening. And next up is Becca.
Okay, hi everyone. I'm Rebecca Nezazon. I'm from Brazier Falls, New York, and this summer I was placed at Clean Air Coalition. I'm here to ask the question, what do frogs and environmental justice have in common? On the surface, nothing. But after this summer, I can recognize that these two words are in fact both involved in something vital to every person in this room: health. Realizing this connection, which I will explain shortly, was critical in developing my understanding of advocacy and Clean Air's commitment to the people. Clean Air performs its essential work through a transformative justice network, meaning they don't just go into the community, fix the problem, and leave the residents to fend for themselves. Beyond simply holding polluters accountable, Clean Air works with local communities to achieve lasting solutions and continues to support neighborhood residents long after the initial goal is met. In a way, transformative justice is infinite because the impacts of environmental justice will last generations. While leaving a tour of the former Tonawanda Coke plant, the site of decades of toxic emissions, dozens of tiny frogs began crossing the road under our feet. I, for one, do not like frogs. However, my supervisor Bridge informed us that amphibians inhabiting an area that was once incredibly poisonous was a sign the remediation efforts were effective, that the land was slowly gaining back its health. Now, one could say that a cycle is infinite. If frogs have a life cycle, so do environmental justice campaigns. So we're gonna take it back to 4th grade science class for a few minutes. A frog goes through 4 major life phases: egg, tadpole, froglet, and adult frog. Environmental justice campaigns also go through stages, but in this case, you want the problem to be dealt with before it reaches the adult frog stage. So while this circle indicates passing time, it also represents growing severity. Clean Air's role is to interrupt the cycle of pollution, to ensure the safety of all those involved. To start with the youngest period, I had the privilege of watching the beginnings of a campaign. I attended a Clean Air hosted environmental justice forum in Niagara Falls in June. I was amazed by people's willingness to be so vulnerable in front of complete strangers. It struck me that these topics are inherently personal, that health and well-being are perhaps the most individualized parts of ourselves. So of course people were inclined to advocate for themselves and their families.
Although the severity of these spoken issues are not yet completely realized by clean air, Niagara Falls may in a few months move beyond the egg stage and become an official campaign area. The tadpoles are the campaigns Clean Air is currently working on. They have worked for years on several community environmental matters that have affected people's lives, including contamination from an industrial plant in Delavan Grider. Clean Air intervened when the community called upon them, and since then they have made incremental gains to manage the damage done by the owners of this property. In that sense, these efforts are still in the earlier stages, as the issues have not been entirely remedied. The community's role in this case is still imperative to force change, and residents remain engaged in the fight. I reserved the froglet comparison for the origin of this presentation, the campaign surrounding the Tonawanda Coke Corporation. This plant produced Coke for 40 years by basically baking coal in really hot ovens. As a result of contamination seeping into the ground and air, people began to contract health issues and began to organize. Clean Air was then involved in the efforts to hold the corporation accountable for more than a decade. And in fact, they're still active in the remediation effort, advocating that the land not be repurposed for a data center. A froglet so close to adulthood, yet still out of reach. If things had continued the way they were going, this environmental scandal would have continued to cause the public harm. However, the community and Clean Air stepped in before the damage was irreversible, much like how a froglet still has to grow before being considered a frog. Love Canal is our adult frog. To remind everyone, Love Canal was a working class neighborhood and toxic dumping site that suffered at the hands of a reckless chemical company, forcing almost all of its residents to relocate or face unimaginable health consequences. My supervisors drove me through the site, and it was empty except for 3 houses. It truly is a ghost town. It was hard to imagine this large patch of uninhabited, vacant land once being a residential neighborhood. And it was even harder to think about all the people that unnecessarily lost their lives because of a company's negligence and greed. This infamous case is an example of an environmental problem growing so large that the land is unable to return to its original condition. Love Canal was obviously not one of Clean Air's campaign areas, but I wanted to illustrate their role in preventing issues from reaching adult frog status or otherwise past the point of no return. Ultimately, Clean Air Coalition is a protector of health, just as frogs are an indicator of health. Over the last 8 weeks, I observed how advocacy and community organizing are imperative to securing this fundamental right. It is inspiring how Clean Air leverages transformative justice to improve Buffalo and the surrounding area. Thank you, and next we will hear from Shruti Damaraju.
Hi everyone, my name is Shruti Damaraju. I am a rising junior at Cornell's ILR School. I'm from St. Louis, Missouri. This summer, I had the pleasure of working with the Western New York Law Center, and if you can't tell from the title, today I will be talking about my favorite part of the summer, which was getting to talk to people. First, a little bit of context though. I wanted to be placed with the Law Center partly because I was really interested in the project, which I will explain in a little bit, but also because I wanted to know more about what working in law is actually like. I've really enjoyed the law-related classes I've had the opportunity to take at Cornell, and I've become particularly interested in labor and employment law and the ability to advocate for the greater community. However, there was one aspect that I still couldn't quite get over, and that is the isolation. I love working in a collaborative, open, and generally fun environment, and working long hours doing paperwork, which was my only perception of law, seemed to kind of be the opposite of that. However, this summer, I was soon proven very wrong when working on my project. I had the pleasure of working with the Consumer Debt Department at the Law Center and researching a debt collection tactic called a warrant of commitment. Basically, if you owe a debt and you fail to respond to a 44-question survey within 7 days of receiving it in the mail, you can be held in contempt of court, fined, and arrested, despite debtors' prisons being officially outlawed in the United States in 1833. My research involves evaluating the community impact of this harmful process, such as how many warrants are issued in Erie County and what demographic is being impacted by this the most. While this did involve a lot of spreadsheets and going through court files, which I actually ended up really enjoying, my supervisor, Matthew, emphasized the importance of talking to real people affected by this predatory process. However, until I was able to attend Claro, which is a free legal clinic run by the Law Center, and talk to a man who was on the verge of getting arrested through this process, I didn't really get why talking to the community would be such an important part of my report. To me, the objective data seemed like it would be a far better indicator of capturing the greater impact of the warrant. However, talking to this client quickly changed my perspective. The singular hour I spent hearing about his worries and fears about the debt collection process, as well as all of the other things he had going on in his life that were impacting his ability to even think about the case, really proved to be far more helpful to my research than the weeks I spent poring over case files. It truly did capture just how harmful this process can be in ways that numbers and graphs never can. After this experience, I began to reflect a bit more on my time with the Law Center overall. And I realized that everyone there values not only talking with the community they serve, but also talking to each other. The third floor is always filled with chatter, whether it be someone asking for a second opinion on a document or just giving an update on their recent vacation. Everyone truly cares about helping each other in any capacity they can. For example, one of my favorite afternoons at the Law Center involved a conversation with Jean, one of the paralegals. They knew that I was very interested in labor law, so they spent over an hour talking to me about what it was like organizing the Law Center. They also went over the Law Center's collective bargaining agreement with me and answered every single silly little question that I had. Did this have anything to do with my project? Absolutely not. Did this take a lot of time out of Jean's day? Yes. But I realized that when you work in an environment where everyone is passionate about what they do and passionate about their commitment to serving others, it's impossible not to collaborate and talk about that passion. And as I reflected on this experience at the Western New York Law Center, I started to realize that a community of people that is really passionate about what they do and loves to talk about that passion, it just sounded so familiar to me. And that's when I realized, oh my gosh, that's also what the cohort is like. We are a very, very friendly and a very, very chatty bunch. And as much as I love going to the beach with everyone or our late night game nights, one of my favorite parts of the summer is going to be nearly falling asleep on the bus back from work every day because I'm so tired, but immediately regaining all my energy when I see my roommates and we talk about our days. Our sense of community is what allows us to do this type of work day in and day out. While our individual passion for all of our projects is enough of a motivator on its own, talking to everyone else in the cohort about the amazing work that they're all doing has inspired me to continue down this path as well. Now, when I say this path, what do I really mean? I think my time at the Western New York Law Center has taught me that my future path can involve law, and I would definitely enjoy doing that. Although a fair amount of my work did involve spreadsheets and going through a lot of court files, which I slightly feared, the part that I was most worried about, the isolation, was absolutely absent from the Law Center. Talking was my favorite part of this summer because it showed me the power and the importance of communication, whether that be with the community you're hoping to serve, with your coworkers and collaborators, or even just with your friends at the end of the day. Our passion for serving others and our passion for talking about it nonstop is what allows us to keep doing the work that we do, and it's what really has defined my high road experience. Thank you. And last but certainly not least, I'd like to introduce Alia and hand it off.
Hi everyone, my name is Alia Amer. I'm a rising senior at the Cornell Brooks School of Public Policy. I'm originally from Cream Ridge, New Jersey, and this summer I worked at the Buffalo Center for Health Equity. So this summer I worked on a project mainly having to do with maternal health. I focused on a very niche international policy called the Finland Baby Box Policy, which is a universal, really great policy where if you are an expecting mother, you get a really big box with $400 worth of just goods and essential items that you need for a very vulnerable period of your life. So it's great, and of course it's free of charge in Scandinavian areas. And so I imagined and explored the possibility of maybe introducing something similar in Western New York and Erie County. And when I was writing my final recommendation, I kind of had to ask myself some questions, like what does policy change actually look like? Does it involve me sitting alone in an office, writing up a policy brief, or does it need community and something more than that? So in order to answer these questions for myself, I had to share what my definition or what my former definition of community actually was. For me, community was my family. My dad immigrated from Egypt at a young age, and my mom had immigrated from Puerto Rico. And whenever I would visit my family and my neighborhoods back home, the community was just structured in a very collective and communal way. Whenever I would walk through the streets, there was always music. Everyone's doors were wide open. There was the smell of food everywhere. And my parents would get really annoyed because when I was younger, my favorite memories would be just walking through the street, walking up to somebody's house, a stranger I didn't know, and they would just let me in, give me a good time, feed me some food, and I was just welcomed. And of course, coming back to the United States, things weren't really structured that way, especially after COVID. The neighborhoods were quiet. Living in a predominantly white neighborhood, everyone's doors were shut. So our family had to look inward to find that community. So for me, my former community definition was my family. And this was a little problematic for me because whenever I had to move away for school, there was a little bit of a trade-off because in order to move forward with my career and meet new people and get a higher education, I was leaving my community behind. One thing I discovered as some of our programs at the Buffalo Center for Health Equity was that doors were always open. So at one of my favorite programs, the Jazz and Justice Festival, we had performed jazz for a couple of hours, given food to some people, and spread awareness about banning the sales of menthol cigarettes in Buffalo and just the overall mission of the Buffalo Center for Health Equity. And at this program and at the check-in table, some people would walk by the event and be like, "What's this? There's some good music going on. I smell some good food. What's happening?" And we would have them register. They would come in and have a good time. And this sort of structured communal event sounded a little familiar to me because I just felt like I was at home, and I loved that. This taught me that my community is not just my immediate family. At that event, I had made such wonderful connections with people, and I had never felt like I was at home unless I was with my family back in New Jersey or with my actual family in Puerto Rico and in Egypt. So working this summer reminded me of home, and it showed me that my career and my family did not have to be mutually exclusive. This also gave me a new perspective on public health. These pictures were taken at the Jazz and Justice event, and it was my job to kind of give out resources at the end of the event to people who are interested on future events just fostered by the Buffalo Center for Health Equity. And these were pictures taken of people opening up the pamphlets and learning about it, which is just the ultimate goal of public health awareness and education. So seeing me have such a good time making connections with people and seeing them actually learn and be interested in what we're trying to do, it was just amazing. It showed me that my new community is actually everywhere I turn, and that I can integrate community-centered care into my career, which was just something amazing I learned this summer. Thank you.
We made it, friends. We did it. One more round of applause for our incredible fellows. This last week, they're finishing up their projects, they're doing their committee work, they're finishing their final projects for this presentation. And some of them are texting at 11 p.m., asking for certain things to be printed off, which is totally fine, and I appreciate and respect the hustle. So thank you all for all of your hard work throughout the summer and for especially these last few days. So I think I shared at the beginning of our time together a lot of notes of gratitude. So for a lot of our Haudenosaunee communities, we have the Ganonyok, which is a Thanksgiving address. I am humble enough to defer to my elders who can officially name all of the variety of things that we are grateful for. But I'd like to close a little bit with gratitude too. So thank you. We have now arrived at the place where we end our words. Of all the things we have named, it was not our intention to leave anything out. So if something was forgotten, we leave it to each individual to send such greetings and thanks in their own way. To bring our time together full circle again, I'd like to remind you of what Lugene Flaron, our former director of the CoLab and founder, challenged us to do. When she talked about the urgency and the legacy earlier this summer, she wanted us and reminded us to choose the high road again and again and again. She quoted Angela Davis, "You have to act as if it were possible to radically transform the world, and you have to do it all the time." I am humbled and hopeful. You are intelligent, kind, you love food, and you are an inquisitive group. We hope that you continue to choose the high road, that you remember we're stronger together, and that you believe to your very core that change can start with you. Thank you all. This culminates our program. So I am the queen of logistics in addition to being the fellowship mom. So what I'm going to ask is we are going to take a group photo outside on the steps, which we can do once we exit through these doors and we turn right. For friends and family who are joining us from afar, you know that you've been invited to our luncheon downstairs. So one last round of applause as we make our way out.